My golden sister stole my $30,000 Rolex. My parents defended her. Then Grandpa showed up with a gas can, the room went dead silent. She stole my $30,000 Rolex, then looked me in the eye and swore she did nothing wrong. My parents said I was overreacting. But when my 78-year-old grandfather, a war veteran, walked out holding a gas can with fire in his eyes, the room fell dead silent. This wasn't just about a watch anymore. It was about truth, respect, and drawing a line. Even if it meant tearing the family apart. My name is Ethan. I am 30 years old and work as a software developer in San Jose, California. I reside in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs with my grandfather, Walter. This is the property I bought 3 years ago with my own money after working for 5 years at various computer businesses in Silicon Valley. We currently live a quiet and joyful life. My grandfather is 78 years old this year, but he is still strong, sharp, and wonderfully straightforward. He's a war veteran with a strict, no-nonsense demeanor. He does not accept injustice. My granddad and I share a really strong bond. He understands me the best and has always supported me in all of my important life decisions. Previously, in addition to Grandpa, my parents and younger sister Brielle resided at this house. However, after a big family issue erupted exactly 1 year ago, I was forced to make the most difficult life decision. My story started exactly 1 year ago. It was a usual weekday in early July, and I was sitting in my office contemplating a new project. My phone suddenly started vibrating with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen and saw Grandpa Walter's name appear. I answered without hesitation as I greeted him with my customary, "Hey Grandpa." He interrupted me with a rushed, frantic voice. "Ethan. I just saw Brielle walk out of your room. She had a watch in her hand." Hearing that struck me like a lightning bolt. My heart began hammering in my chest. I hurriedly thanked him and hung up, my mind racing with 100 ideas. With shaky palms I launched the home security software on my smartphone. Time slowed to a halt when I rewound the tape from earlier that afternoon. Then the thing I feared most appeared on the screen. Brielle snuck into my room and walked right to the glass cabinet containing my precious watch collection. I paused the footage and zoomed in. My throat clenched as I realized the watch she had taken was my Rolex Submariner date, which was worth $30,000. It was the most costly timepiece I possessed, purchased just a few months before to commemorate my promotion at work. It wasn't only about the money. That watch represented years of struggle and personal triumph. As I finished watching the film, another detail struck me. In my haste to get to work that morning I failed to lock my bedroom door, which I never do. Brielle was able to slip in unobserved because of one thoughtless moment. Sitting in my office, I felt split apart. On one hand the camera video was unmistakable. Brielle had stolen from me. But on the other hand, part of me remained hesitant, holding out hope that she had simply borrowed it to look at and would return it later. I even considered if I should contact the police immediately. I looked up to the wall clock. Only 2 hours remain in the workday. I chose to wait. I still wanted to believe Brielle could bring it back. I tried to concentrate on doing the rest of my work, but my mind kept racing, wondering about what she had done and what would happen next. When work officially finished at 5 p.m., I immediately packed my desk and raced out of the office like a man on a mission. My pulse was hammering the entire way home, not just from fear, but also from a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just maybe, I had gotten everything wrong. When I eventually pulled into the driveway, I saw it was just Grandpa and myself at home. My parents and Brielle hadn't returned yet, and the home felt strangely quiet. Without wasting a second, I parked and dashed inside, racing straight up to my room in the last desperate hope that everything was a misunderstanding. My hands trembled as I opened the glass cabinet. And there it was, the stark, awful truth. The watch was gone. Anger and disappointment washed over me at that instant. The Rolex Submariner date was more than simply a showy luxury item. I had carefully preserved it in my bedroom's display case, treating it as a valued item. I only wore it on special occasions, and Grandpa understood how much it meant to me. He would continually encourage me to treat it like gold. I remembered Brielle standing in front of the case, marveling at the collection with that unmistakable envious expression on her face, continually asking questions about the most costly watch. That obsessive desire had always made me anxious, and I had warned her several times. Do not touch anything in my room, particularly the watches. But after what happened today, it was evident she never heeded their warnings. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. This was exactly what happened after years of our parents indulging her. Brielle has always been guarded, forgiven, and never truly held responsibility for her acts. Standing in front of that empty display case, it felt like the universe was collapsing. Not only had I lost something precious, but I also discovered my sister had deceived me, someone I had always loved and trusted. To help you fully grasp how this all happened, I need to tell you about my family members and the events that lead up to this mess. My father, Richard Miller, is 55 and has been in the insurance sector for almost 30 years. His income is low, but he is always under financial stress. What disturbs me the most is his bad habit of living beyond his means, spending more than he makes, and never learning to save. My mother, Elaine Miller, is 53 and works part-time at a tiny neighborhood bookshop. Her income is insufficient to cover basic living expenditures. She is naturally sensitive and emotional. Then there's my younger sister, Brielle Miller. At the time she was 22 years old and about to graduate from college. Brielle had been indulged by her entire family growing up, thus she acquired a self-centered personality and a love for pricey luxury stuff. Anything sparkling, expensive or designer immediately drew her attention. In 2023, my parents lost all of their savings due to a bad investment endeavor with a friend. They were compelled to sell the house that Grandpa had given them years before to pay off their obligations. When the house was gone, they had nowhere to go. They were effectively homeless. Desperate, my parents approached me and asked to stay with me temporarily while they tried to get back on their feet. First, I flatly refused. I knew my family well and didn't want my quiet existence flipped upside down. But then they pulled the final card. They brought up grandfather Walter. He was living with them at the time, and the thought of Grandpa in pain broke my resolve. Finally, I agreed to let the entire family move in rent-free, assuming that this would be a temporary solution while they sorted things out. At first everything seemed fine. We all shared the space and home tasks in a peaceful manner. However, fissures appeared over time. Brielle began asking me for money. First for textbooks, then for tuition, and then for personal necessities. I lent it to her because I wanted to assist, but she never returned it. And whenever I brought it up, she always found a way to avoid the subject. Whenever I objected, my parents would quickly come to her defense with their standard line: "The family needs to understand each other." They were continuously making excuses for her, which made me feel selfish and callous. Things got out of hand when Brielle started helping herself to my possessions. It began with my laptop. She claimed hers was broken. Then my headphones. Then there's something else. Whenever I caught her, she made a convenient explanation and vowed to return it. But she never did. The anxiety reached its pinnacle approximately a month before the watch incident. Brielle entered my room and observed the collection of watches inside the glass display case. Her eyes lit up in a way that terrified me. She was raving about how lovely they were and inquiring about the price of each one, particularly the Rolex Submariner date. After that, I felt compelled to defend my belongings. So I put a small hidden camera directed right at the cabinet containing my watch collection. I never expected that small camera would be the most important piece of evidence. The one who recorded a crystal-clear video of Brielle snatching my Rolex. Around 6 p.m., the front door opened, signaling that my parents had arrived home. Brielle strolled in less than a minute later, most likely timing her entrance carefully to escape suspicion. When they entered the living room, all three were taken aback to see Grandpa and me sitting quietly and waiting. Normally I'd be showering or relaxing in my room at that time. When everyone arrived home, I asked them to sit on the couch because I had something important to discuss. The atmosphere immediately became tense. Grandpa sat in his usual armchair, examining everyone intently with his piercing, discriminating gaze, as if he could read every expression on their faces. When everyone was seated, I began the conversation that would change everything. I looked each of them in the eyes and gently asked, "My Rolex went missing today. Does anyone know anything about it?" Brielle's reaction to my statements was over the top, plainly phony shock. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you just misplaced it." My folks got in as well, seeming anxious as if they were actually upset about the loss. Trying to seem concerned, my mother inquired, "Are you sure it's missing? Maybe you just forgot where you put it." And my father weighed in with what seemed like a realistic guess. Could it be in the office? Maybe. But something about their response seemed odd, too scripted and controlled. I watched them, then returned my gaze to Brielle and inquired again, locking eyes with her. "Are you sure you know nothing?" She clung to her falsehood, attempting to appear offended. "Why would you accuse me? I would never remove your belongings." Then my father stepped in to defend her. "Are you accusing Brielle? That is ludicrous." At that point I realized it was time to cease playing along. I slowly removed my phone from my pocket and launched the security camera app. The room went completely silent. I looked at Brielle once again, my voice gentle but forceful. Then explain it. I turned the phone around and pressed play. The TV displayed crystal clear footage of Brielle slipping into my room at exactly 3 p.m. That afternoon he reached inside the display case and took the Rolex. The proof was undeniable, right there in plain sight. Despite the proof on my phone screen, Brielle tried to deny it. Recklessly, urgently, she muttered. I was just in your room, getting something else. That weak excuse made my blood boil. I sifted through the film until she unlocked the glass case and purposefully grabbed for the watch. The video was really clear. There was no misunderstanding her intention. My voice became very cold as I requested something else. Huh? Then why is it the most expensive watch I own that you accidentally took? Instead of allowing her to respond, my parents stepped in to defend their beloved daughter. My mother quickly spoke up, appealing. Brielle probably only wanted to borrow it. She did not intend to steal honey. My father also weighed in, behaving as if I was overreacting. This is a family matter. Is it necessary to overstate the case? Hearing them unquestioningly defend Brielle caused something inside me to shatter. I erupted. Borrow without asking? Sneaking into someone's room and snatching their belongings? That is theft. Brielle burst into tears as soon as she realized things were going wrong. I just planned to borrow it for a few days. I didn't mean any harm. Of course, whenever the baby sobbed, my parents raced to her side like clockwork. My father quickly said, "See, she just wanted to borrow it. Don't make this into a big deal." Then, in the height of the tension, Grandpa Walter, who had been silently watching the entire time, spoke. His voice was calm but had the weight of a hammer. 22 years old and still don't know right from wrong. That sentence struck the room like a thunderclap. Everything went silent. I sensed the moment and made my final offer. I stared Brielle dead in the eye and said, "Give the watch back and I'll let this go." Instead of expressing regret, Brielle snapped, her voice uncompromising and obstinate. "I told you I was going to return it after a few days." That was it. My final thread of patience snapped. My voice was firm, definitive, and loud enough to make everybody freeze. "Give it back now or I'm calling the police." That warning struck like a bomb. For the first time, everyone in the room recognized I wasn't faking it. When they could no longer deny the truth and I threatened to contact the cops, the entire family appeared to silently shift to an entirely other tactic. Leveraging familial ties to guilt-trip me. My father responded in a tone that suggested I was exaggerating the situation. "Ethan, don't blow this out of proportion. Brielle was going to borrow it for a few days." Following that, my mother added a moral lecture. Family is supposed to support one another, not take each other to court. When Brielle saw her parents protecting her, she burst into tears and remarked in a voice that made it sound like I was the one being cruel, "It's just a watch, Ethan. Do you have to make such a big scene over this?" My father escalated the guilt trip, sensing that this tactic would be effective. He explained that sharing is typical in a family. "What you're doing is tearing this family apart, Ethan." Hearing all of this was like being bitten by a swarm of fire ants. They were trying to depict me as the evil person, as if I was callous and unconcerned for my family. All because I dared to demand what was legally mine. While everyone was arguing, I realized Grandpa was still sitting quietly in his armchair, watching every word and action. But the sight in his eyes and the tight hold his hands had on the armrests told me everything. He was furious. Grandpa was never the kind to express emotion readily, but what was happening in front of him, his granddaughter stealing and then being covered and justified by her parents, had pushed him over the limit. I knew Grandpa would find this behavior inappropriate. With everything he'd seen and experienced, he saw the difference between genuine love and toxic indulgence. The air in the living room became heavier, and it impacted me hard. I was standing alone in front of my entire family, as they attempted to make theft appear insignificant. Grandpa said nothing more after witnessing Brielle's obstinacy and my parents' defense of her. He abruptly jumped up from his recliner and exited the living room without saying anything. His motions were slow yet deliberate, with an intensity that everyone could sense in the air. I saw him walk straight for the door, then to the small storage shed at the end of the yard. An odd sense of dread developed in my chest, like if something catastrophic was about to occur. Meanwhile, my parents and Brielle continued to argue with me, ignorant that Grandpa had left the room. They just continued repeating the same explanations and phrases about family and forgiveness, as if saying them repeatedly would somehow make theft acceptable. I wasn't just upset. I was drained. Not only was the watch gone, but my family was manipulating reality to make me look like the evil guy for merely desiring what was mine. Heavy footsteps reverberated from the rear door about 5 minutes later, as the debate continued to boil up. There was something unusual about the sound that caused everyone to stop chatting and glance around. Then Grandpa walked in, and what we saw shocked the entire room. He held a red gasoline can, which he used to fuel the lawnmower. His expression was serious. His eyes were cold and focused on each of us. He didn't say anything, did not make a single gesture to explain himself. He merely stood there, holding the gas can. The living room fell into complete silence. Nobody dared to breathe loudly. Nobody moved a muscle. The only sound left was the ticking of the wall clock, which echoed across a room so tense that the air seemed to cease moving. When they saw Grandpa standing there with the gas can in his hand, the entire family froze like statues. Nobody could believe what we were witnessing. My father stammered, his voice shaking. "Dad, what are you doing?" But Grandpa did not respond. He just kept strolling softly out into the front yard. Each step was heavy, methodical, and carried a terrifying feeling of purpose. We followed him like puppets, saying nothing and only moving when instinct told us to. Outside in the driveway were two vehicles, my parents' silver Toyota Camry and Brielle's red Honda Civic. Then Grandpa started to act. He quickly opened the gas can and began pouring gasoline over the Toyota, from the bonnet to the trunk. The harsh chemical odor of petroleum permeated the air. My mother yelled in horror, "Dad, what are you doing? Please stop." But Grandpa did not flinch. He moved on to Brielle's Civic, dousing every inch with the same chilling calm, making certain no detail was overlooked. Brielle screamed between sobs. "Grandpa, please don't, that's my car, I need it for school." My father, now in full panic, dashed forward to stop him. "Dad, please. We can sit down and talk this out." That's when Grandpa paused. He slowly turned to face his son, my father. His eyes cold. The entire yard became absolutely silent. With a voice like steel, Grandpa asked, "In this family, sharing each other's things is normal, right?" Everybody held their breath. My father had used the same statement just minutes before to justify Brielle's actions. After a few seconds of uncomfortable stillness, Grandpa glanced around at everyone with rage in his eyes. Then said, "Then these two cars are mine now. I can use them however I want." With that, he gently removed a lighter from his shirt pocket, grasping it tightly in his hand. That one move put the entire family into complete hysteria. When my father and Brielle saw the lighter in Grandpa's fingers, they both yelled out in horror. My father shouted, his voice trembling, "Dad, please don't. We were wrong. I'm sorry, Dad." Brielle cried hysterically, her voice choked from fear. "Grandpa, please don't burn my car. I'm sorry. I know I messed up." But Grandpa remained there, stone-faced and cold. He cautiously raised the lighter, his thumb lingering above the spark wheel. At that moment, time appeared to stand still. Then he shouted, "Get on your knees!" My father and Brielle froze, astonished. They gazed at him, their eyes wide with surprise, as if they couldn't believe this 78-year-old man had just said such words. Seeing them still frozen in place, Grandpa cried again, louder and sharper. "I said, get on your knees." The command hit like a hammer. My father, Richard Miller, who had always considered himself the head of the household, went to his knees on the chilly ground. His hands trembled. His voice crackled. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know I was wrong." Brielle remained standing, her face drenched with tears. Grandpa turned to her, his gaze cold and without mercy. "Not kneeling? Fine. Then say goodbye to your car." He pushed his hand closer to the ignition wheel, only inches away from creating a spark. With a single flick, everything would go up in flames. Brielle was so afraid she almost passed out. She dropped on her knees beside my father, her entire body quivering. My mother stood back, silently crying, frozen by dread. She didn't dare to get closer. She understood Grandpa had entered a state beyond anyone's ability to forecast or control. Grandpa glanced down at my father, who was kneeling in the ground, and his expression was as harsh as a court giving sentence. In a cold as steel voice he asked, "Richard, do you even know how to raise a child?" My father bowed his head, reluctant to face his father's eyes. In a hushed, sad voice he responded, "I know I failed, Dad. I didn't raise Brielle the right way." Grandpa nodded carefully and issued a command that left no space for refusal. "Then tell your daughter to return the watch and apologize to Ethan." Without hesitation my father turned to Brielle, his voice quivering but forceful. "You need to give the watch back to Ethan and apologize. Sincerely, no more excuses." What I was seeing felt like a nightmare. My father and sister were on their knees before Grandpa, and the acrid odor of gasoline filled the fading twilight air. Even while kneeling on the frigid ground, Brielle hesitated to fully accept her crime. Instead of expressing regret, she continued to justify what she had done. She spoke in a combative tone. "It's just a watch. Does it have to be this serious?" Hearing that, Grandpa's face went beet crimson with wrath. His eyes blazed up like fire, revealing a fury I had rarely seen in him. He shouted, "What? You're still arguing? Even now you don't know you're wrong." Then he made a motion as if he were ready to flip the lighter. My father, now in utter terror, nearly yelled, "Brielle, apologize to Ethan right now, stop arguing." But Brielle remained obstinate until the bitter end. Her voice shook yet remained defiant. "I didn't do anything wrong. I was borrowing it. I was going to give it back in a few days." Watching things unfold, I could sense Grandpa's rage bubbling up. His hand gripping the lighter was trembling. Not from fear, but from rage. In an ice-cold tone he said, 22 years old. You still can't tell right from wrong. You steal and then try to argue your way out of it." Then he stared directly at Brielle, his voice full of contempt. "Someone like you doesn't deserve to live in this house." Brielle burst into tears again as Grandpa scolded her. Despite her desperation, she attempted to shift the blame. "You're just taking Ethan's side. You're not being fair." That was the final straw. Grandpa had completely run out of patience. He moved to light the lighter, but just then, a police siren pierced the air, becoming louder as it approached. The siren struck like a lightning bolt in the midst of the storm. Everyone turned to gaze down the road, where a police cruiser was approaching the house. A cop car was going down the street in front of our house when it halted abruptly. They must have sensed something was wrong after being alarmed by the bizarre scene in our yard. The crowd gathered outside, the strong odor of gasoline in the air. 2 officers hurriedly jumped out of the truck, hands resting near their radios, ready to call for help if necessary. As they neared the scene, the elder officer asked, "What's going on here?" The moment they noticed the pools of gasoline on the ground, the lighter in Grandpa's fingers, and the 2 cars soaked in fuel, their demeanor changed instantaneously. Both officers went into high alert. The older officer gave a harsh command. "Sir, put the lighter on the ground. Now." Without complaint, Grandpa slowly bent down and carefully placed the lighter on the ground, away from the fuel-soaked area. After the issue was under control, the second officer approached us and asked, "Can someone explain what exactly is happening here?" My father and Brielle were still kneeling on the ground, too scared to move without Grandpa's approval. They simply gazed up, their eyes imploring someone to act. I came forward and clearly addressed the officers. "Officer, my sister stole my $30,000 Rolex. I have clear security camera footage as proof." Following my explanation, the senior officer glanced down at Brielle, still on her knees, and asked her, "Ma'am, can you confirm this?" Brielle replied through tears and trembling, "I was just borrowing it, not stealing. I was going to give it back." Upon hearing this, the senior cop shook his head and calmly explained, "Taking someone's property without permission is considered theft under the law." The second officer added, "And with something valued at $30,000, we're looking at a felony-level offense." Then Grandpa spoke up, his voice calm yet firm. "Ethan, let her go to jail. Let her learn what it means to respect other people's property." His remarks landed like a bombshell. The whole family was startled. My mother covered her mouth in fear. My father glanced up in surprise. Brielle sobbed as if her entire world had suddenly crumbled. After hearing the entire story, one of the cops approached me and asked, "Do you want to file an official report for this theft?" That question sliced through the tension like a razor. My parents gazed at me with desperate eyes, as if what I said next would determine their fate. My mother broke down and begged, "Ethan, please don't do this to Brielle, I'm begging you." Without waiting, my father chimed in, his voice shaking. "Think about Brielle's future. You can't destroy your sister's life." But instead of remorse, Brielle burst in rage, shouting, "You can't do this to me, I'm your sister." Even at this point, her disobedience ignited a fire within me. I turned, looked the officer dead in the eye and said, "Yes, I want to file an official theft report." My remarks landed like a death sentence. The entire family was astonished, frozen in amazement that I had gone forward with it. Without hesitating, the officer nodded professionally and said, "All right, we'll begin documenting everything and proceed with the necessary steps." As soon as he said that, Grandpa grinned quietly and informed me, "That's right. Let her learn what fear feels like." You can't let thieves walk away without consequences. His remarks hit like a final verdict, confirming that my decision was correct. While my parents and Brielle remained stunned, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. Justice was ultimately served. At that time, I knew one thing for certain. My family wouldn't be the same again. But that was the price I was willing to pay to fight for what was right. After I indicated that I intended to file the report, the two officers started documenting the case professionally. They took out a notepad and a voice recorder, intending to document every detail of the encounter. When they asked about the security footage, I took out my phone and showed them. The video captured Brielle slipping into my room and stealing the watch. Undeniable high-resolution evidence. After analyzing the film and confirming that the evidence was good, the senior officer approached Brielle with handcuffs. She was still kneeling and trembling. The officer spoke aggressively. "Brielle Miller, you are under arrest for stealing high-value property." Then he started reading her Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Brielle burst into tears as the handcuffs were placed around her wrists. She turned to me and yelled, "Ethan, please don't do this." She begged with desperation. "Just give me a week. I'll give the watch back. I'm sorry, I mean it this time." Unfortunately, it was too late. The cops had completed the arrest procedure and were about to lead her to the automobile. My parents panicked when they saw their daughter being hauled away and chased the police cruiser. My mother shouted out, imploring, "Please, officers, she's just a young girl, please give her another chance." In order to assist them understand, one of the cops gently explained, "Theft of property valued over $5,000 is classified as a felony under California state law." He proceeded, "She could be sentenced to anywhere from 1 to 3 years in prison, depending on the court's ruling." When my mom heard that, she sank to the ground as if struck by lightning, sobbing violently. She couldn't bear watching her daughter in handcuffs being placed into the police car. My father raced to assist her up, then turned back to me, his face contorted in anger. "Are you happy now? You got what you wanted." I remained mute. I didn't say anything, but he continued going, shouting, "You've destroyed this family, Ethan. Are you satisfied now?" Before I could speak, Grandpa Walter stepped forward and spoke for me, his voice hard and firm. "Ethan didn't destroy this family. Brielle did. She made her choice." Grandpa's words were the last verdict, an unequivocal assertion of who was to blame for what had occurred. After Brielle was taken away and the police car drove away, we stood in front of the home in a hushed quiet. The air still smelled like gasoline, and no one's tears had dried. Standing erect in front of my parents, I looked them in the eye and spoke firmly. "After what happened today, I'm asking both of you to leave this house. You have 30 days starting today." My parents were astonished, frozen with amazement. They stood there like statues, mouths gaping and speechless. Then my father exploded, shouting in wrath, "You're kicking your father out? Have you lost your conscience?" I didn't let emotions influence me. I proceeded. "In the next 3 days, you'll receive a formal notice through certified mail." Hearing it, my mother sank on the ground, imploring through her sobs. "Please, son, I'm begging you. Don't do this." But I remained solid in my resolve. I informed them. "You've lived here rent-free for a year. No bills, no responsibilities. And instead of being grateful, you defended a thief and tried to make me the villain. I can't live with people who don't know the difference between right and wrong." Hearing those statements, my father's face became pale with fury. He jabbed his shaky finger at me and said, "You'll pay for this, Ethan." But no matter how much they screamed, wept, or threatened, I didn't back down. Grandpa stood there next to me, saying nothing. However, his presence was loud enough. He stood beside me like a tower of strength, silently confirming that I was doing the right thing. When my parents saw I would not back down, they turned to their final tactic, requesting Grandpa to interfere. In despair, my father went on his knees before him and pleaded, "Dad, please, I'm begging you. Talk to Ethan." My mother then knelt alongside him, crying and begging. "We know we were wrong. Please give us a chance to make things right." Grandpa gazed down at the two kneeling before him. His expression was blank. There is no trace of sympathy or emotion. His eyes were frigid, like if he were looking at strangers. After a long silence, he spoke. His voice was sharp and emotionless. "You had an entire year to show who you were. And you chose to defend a thief instead of standing for truth and justice. Now you want forgiveness. It's too late." That single statement was the final judgment. a closed door. My parents' last hope was ended. The next 30 days were the most tense and uncomfortable period this house has ever experienced. The air felt so heavy, like you could cut through it with a knife. My parents struggled to find a new home to reside, constantly challenged by their restricted cash. Renting in San Jose, with its exorbitant prices, pushed them to desperately seek out more economical alternatives. During that time, Brielle was freed on bail under my parents' supervision while awaiting trial. They gathered together enough money to rent her a small, run-down room until her court date. After meeting with a lawyer, they were told directly, with such clear surveillance film, Brielle has absolutely little chance of avoiding prosecution. My parents' perspective shifted dramatically during the course of 30 days. The arrogance and entitlement they formerly possessed evaporated. They grew shy and silent, as if treading on eggshells in their temporary home. What stood out the most was that they couldn't look me or Grandpa in the eyes. When we crossed paths inside the house, they would bow their heads and hurriedly move away. My mother began preparing wonderful dinners for Grandpa in an apparent attempt at a late apology and to ease the situation. My father too would occasionally ask about Grandpa's health, bumbling through small conversations like a guy who had forgotten how to communicate with his father. But Grandpa remained unfazed. He said coldly, "Now you remember respect. Now that you've been told to leave, suddenly you feel regret." Throughout it all, I felt a peculiar and peaceful relief. It wasn't easy to kick them out, but it was the correct decision, and I don't regret it. One quiet weekend evening, Grandpa and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. He abruptly turned to face me, and his eyes had a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. He softly placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered in an emotional tone, "I'm proud of you, Ethan. So proud." At that time my throat clenched. Praise from my grandfather, the man I admired the most, meant more than anything else could. The 30th day has finally arrived. The sounds of packing and moving rang around the house beginning in the early morning. My folks were finishing up and grabbing the rest of their possessions. After weeks of looking, they had finally found a little apartment in another part of San Jose, considerably further away from their familiar surroundings and distant from the comforts of this home. The mood in the house that day was oppressively quiet and strained. Nobody dared to raise their voice. Every action was measured, methodical, and almost frail. As my mother entered the room she had called home for the previous year, she halted at the threshold. I noticed her shoulders trembling. The tears fell, slowly at first, then steadily. She remained there calmly, staring at the now empty room, as if trying to remember every detail of what was once her home. In that instant, a complex emotion surged in my chest. Not regret, but an unusual combination of melancholy and relief. Grandpa Walter remained silently at the edge of the living room doorway during the relocation process. He didn't say anything, just observed everything with a calm, unreadable gaze. You could not tell what was going through his head. Finally, the last moving truck was loaded and driven away. The sound of its engine receded gradually down the road, leaving behind an almost dreamlike calm. As we stood there, watching the truck fade in the distance, Grandpa breathed and murmured quietly, "At last, this house is peaceful again." Hearing him say that, I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The house was now only for the two of us, two individuals who understood and respected one another. And I knew it right then. I had made the correct decision, no matter how hard. The official trial began 2 months after Brielle's arrest. She was charged with felony grand theft in the Santa Clara County Courthouse. Grandpa and I were present in court as essential witnesses. Brielle's defense attorney did everything he could to reduce the severity of the charges. He stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant is only 22 years old, still very young. This may have been a youthful mistake, not something that should ruin her entire future." But the prosecutor wasn't going to let it go. She described the security footage and presented a powerful, convincing argument to the court. The prosecutor made a clear statement. "Your Honor, this was not a momentary lapse in judgment or a careless mistake. The defendant planned this, waited until no one was home, and deliberately entered a private room to steal the most valuable item in the house. She knew exactly what that watch was worth and actively tried to conceal her actions afterward." When the court asked for Brielle's response, she made a poor attempt to defend herself. "I just meant to borrow it for a few days. I didn't mean to steal it." The judge looked right at her and asked, "Then why didn't you ask your brother for permission before taking it?" Brielle became silent. She didn't have an answer to that simple query. The judge asked what she did with the watch. At that time Brielle had to acknowledge the painful truth. "I sold it and got $12,000. I used the money to repay my credit card debt and some friends' debt. I'd been spending way too much. After considering all of the evidence, the court issued its final decision. The judge stated, "This court sentences the defendant, Brielle Miller, to 18 months in jail." He added, "The defendant must also pay $30,000 in restitution to her brother, Ethan Miller, the full value of the watch, as well as $3,000 in court costs." As the sentence was pronounced, Brielle's parents sobbed openly in court. Their cries were filled with pain, but they could do nothing to change the situation. As for me, I sat there and felt an unexpected sense of serenity sweep over me. Justice had finally been administered fairly and thoroughly. Beside me, Grandpa Walter leaned forward and whispered, "That's right, son. There have to be real consequences for bad actions. It's the only way people learn." It's been precisely a year since the Rolex incident and the commotion that ensued. Today, Grandpa Walter and I are at peace, stable, and genuinely happy. On the professional side, I was promoted to senior software engineer at my business, and my salary has improved tremendously. Grandpa Walter is still in great health. He gets up early every day, reads the newspaper, and tends to the small garden out back. We have long chats every evening, and I appreciate his insight more and more each day. My parents continue to contact me on occasion, but our relationship has never been the same. The calls are brief, courteous, and distant. I still appreciate them as the ones who gave me life, but the trust and closeness we once had are gone forever. Brielle is still serving an 18-month sentence. I've never visited her, nor have I attempted to contact her, and I have no plans to. My story about the Rolex and everything that followed concludes here. I'm not presenting this tale to elicit sympathy or agreement, and I'm definitely not telling it to disgrace my family. I'm posting it because of a profound lesson I've learned. Sometimes true love does not imply condoning every error. Sometimes true love entails setting clear limits and enabling individuals to face the consequences of their behavior. And, most importantly, I want you to understand. Family is not defined solely by blood. Family is made up of people that respect you, support you, and are there for you when you need them the most.